making permanent bonds more difficult to achieve. It's not, they don't want to separate the genders, which is problematic because we evolved differently sexually. As you guys know, men didn't carry babies, women did carry babies, and that created a difference in sexual selection and differences in mating behavior. Okay, it just did, and it creates differences on a neurological level. Okay, so first let's look at some of the data, and we're going to look at the combined data first. So you can look at someone like Dr. Helen Fisher. Now, she had separated things by 3 brain systems. There's more nuance to it than that. That's more of a simplification, okay? The sex drive, okay, craving sexual gratification. Another system for romantic love, which she describes as elation, giddiness, euphoria, craving somebody else, a passionate, obsessive sort of love. And then she talks about attachment, which is more of a feeling of calm or security with a long-term partner. All right. And she describes these 3 systems. And sex with somebody that is purely stimulating the sex drive without stimulating the attachment drive creates a problem later, because you end up creating a neural pathways that separate those 2 things. And what you end up with then is an inability to bond with the sexual gratification. You'll see this in porn people, right? Not to point out porn people or porn chicks in their life, but when they're going through a whole bunch of dudes and sex is their jobs, there ends up being a separation between the act of sex and then their attachments and stuff like that. And so they can't have a healthy long-term relationship that is very deep and very involved and very intense in a way that people would imagine, both men and women, has to involve all 3 of these systems put together. So when you compromise them, it creates a problem. The thing is, though, for a woman to properly bond and to actually want to stick around long-term, all 3 of these systems need to be firing. If she's been having, let's say, in the most extreme sense of porn, casual sex, do you know what I mean? What ends up happening is she ends up not being able to bond with the sexual part of it. And so then this guy basically becomes it's like a glorified friendship, kind of a romantic sort of friendship that very easily fizzles out. It doesn't have the longevity. And so that's a problem. And you can look up Dr. Helen Fisher's work for that. Now, this is general information, but we're going to separate men and women, all right, in a minute. Okay, so Dr. Stephen A. Diamond, book, Psychology of Sex, okay? I'll read that again. Sex is a way of lessening our alienation, isolation, and aloneness by physically connecting with, penetrating, or being penetrated by another person at the most primal level of existence. Sex substantiates, humanizes, and incarnates existence. It produces joy, love, comfort, affection, and sometimes ecstasy. Okay, so that's a really great quote. My only thing about that quote, and we'll get more into it when we get into the differences between men and women, is there's a big difference between penetrating as the male or being penetrated by, okay? And there's a difference on a neural level, and that creates differences in the effects when it comes to, indiscriminate, promiscuous, type of behavior. All right. So we'll move on though from there. Medical Institute of Health. All right. So they say quote from there, and there's a bunch of data there, but I won't bore you with that. When an individual chooses to engage in casual sex, breaking bond after bond with each new sexual partner, the brain forms a synaptic map of 1-night stands or 5-night stands or 10-night stands or casual 3-month relationships, right? With, multiple people, kinds of things. You get what I mean? But it creates a synaptic map. All right. So that's what we're talking about. You have So part of my expertise is neural behavioral conditioning, right? You have a stimulus, you got a response, you got a neural connection between the two. All right. When you do certain behaviors and you have intensity and intent behind the behaviors, you instill that neural response. And so by having a bunch of indiscriminate casual sex and practicing, you're not just practicing the sex and getting the girl, but you're also breaking that bond. So it's a bond of neurochemicals that happen, and then you're breaking it. You're breaking it that night. Grab your stuff and go home or kick her out of your house, right? Or you're breaking it, after she pisses you off, maybe, and whatever. Just she ghosts you, you ghost her. You get what I'm saying, okay? And so you're practicing. You have a neural connection now that you're making more. You're making more of a pathway. It's like walking down a dirt path over and over again, and then your footprints really dig that pathway in there. You see what I mean? And that's easier now. It makes it easier to follow that pathway for future situations. All right. So the Medical Institute of Health continues. This pattern becomes the new normal for the individual. When and if the individual later desires to find a more permanent partner, the brain mapping will have to be overcome. All right. And so making permanent bonds more difficult to achieve. All right. So we're talking about, we're not here to, crap all over women for blowing through a bunch of dudes going through a whole phase. All right. It's not what we're here to do. We're not here to crap on a bunch of men, because you could crap all over me too if you want to, because for running through a bunch of girls. All right. Been there, done it. I get it. It's not to slam on people for their pasts, but what we are saying is the science and what it does. And then we're going to talk about, well, what can we do to overcome it, and how serious is the effects? Because we know that the effects are different for a man than a woman. A lot of women hate to hear that, but it's too bad. Okay. Women need to embrace their femininity just a little bit more and recognize that there's differences in how they're wired just on a genetic level. And that's okay. Right? There's actually good reasons and good things to celebrate about those differences, not just bad things.